The Sunday Paper Review.
On Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Virgin Media. Enjoy an unbeatable lineup of live football and golf with Sky Sports and Sports Extra from Virgin Media.
And you are welcome to the Sunday Paper Review on Off the Ball. John Duggan with you today, sitting in on the papers for Adrian Barry. We're delighted to be joined in studio by the Irish Daily Mail writer Linda Maher and the Sunday Independent columnist Declan Lynch. Linda and Declan, how are we both today?
All good, all good.
Very good, John. Big greatest day of the year.
It is Premier League Christmas Day.
Yeah. And, we have dreamed of these days. We've dreamed.
Like Willy Wonka here in the studio, Declan.
Yeah. It's actually an odd thing that if you regard the last football season as more effectively finishing in the middle of April, because Liverpool were on the home straight then, it's been like 4 months without meaningful football. It's like some would say the Club World Cup was supposed to be a kind of a methadone treatment for the addiction. It was not anything of the kind, of course. So that's 4 months is like extraordinary. I mean, how have we lived? How have
Gaelic Games, Rugby Lions Tour, bit of golf.
Yeah, no, that true. Okay. But
for the soccer purists,
yeah. I mean, that's all fine. Those things are all kind of part of one's portfolio, if you like, right? But the key to it all that makes it all sort of, the one that they all revolve around really is our beloved Premier League, our league as they call it. We. And here we are.
Yes,
rejoice.
Let's look at the front pages of the sports sections and the back pages as well. The Sunday Times today, something old, something new. Haaland scores 2 and debutants Rangers and Turkey add the others. The City make flying start. Fan arrested for racist abuse of Semenyo. So David Lynch writing that a man was arrested yesterday accused of racially abusing the Bournemouth winger Antoine Semenyo at Anfield on Friday night. We have the Sunday Independent Sports section. Paul Kimmage. When did footballers stop being people? We'll come to that in a moment. Police arrest fan after Anfield racist abuse. Semenyo thanks clubs and teammates for their support. So a 47-year-old man from Liverpool was arrested after the alleged racial abuse of Antoine Semenyo in the Bournemouth-Liverpool game on Friday. Back of the Irish Daily Mail, back with a bang, Premier League special. And Eze set to miss Chelsea game as Spurs close in. And we need a quick fix to the Isak saga, says Eddie Howe. We have the back of the Sun on Sunday. Callaher wanted to be gloved. He's ready to shine at Brentford. Creving Callaher set to start today. Well, maybe he might not actually. There's maybe reports that he might have a knock. So but ultimately he will be the number one at Brentford for the season. Back into frame, legend David De Gea as an option for Amorim. That's an unusual back page story. Ed won't wrap the two in army. Eddie Howe avoided condemning Newcastle fans who chanted one greedy after Alexander Isak refused to play at Aston Villa. An early win, but Pep's miffed. Pep Guardiola moaned he's still not happy having too many players in his unhealthy squad. Too many people. I like a deep squad to compete in all competitions, but maybe not happy with the depth of his squad. Sunday World Sport. Master plan. Ruben Amorim hopes not to look back in anger. There's all the Oasis references by keeping Gyökeres scoreless. And we're not healthy, says Pep. Too many people. I don't want to leave players at home. It's not healthy. You cannot create a good vibe or atmosphere to compete. Everyone has to feel they can play and help. The club has known it since last season. It's not news, but the situation is what it is. In the next 2 weeks, people will talk with players and agents to find a solution. Like one player who could be leaving, for example, is Ederson, who was not involved yesterday in the Wolves game, which they won by 4-0. Just kind of on your theme there, Declan, just want to start off with Shane McGrath in the Irish Mail on Sunday, just talking about the Premier League and this is the quote, and not a day too soon, the Premier League is back with the declining relevance of the soap operas that dominated British popular culture from the 1970s through to the turn of the millennium. The drama provided by the league is now its most powerful cultural export. There's plenty wrong with the Premier League, but there's also a lot of snobbery about how it's covered, including by some of those paid to provide the commentary. This is drama. Don't apologise for savouring it.
Well, one aspect of it that's very interesting is like it is this hugely successful global thing, right? I mean, it's like the World League, right? Except it takes place in Britain, which has been determined over the last, say, 10 years to exclude the idea that foreigners can be a kind of benign influence on their society, right? Brexit, all these kind of things, which that psychology is almost like the opposite. We can do all this ourselves, you know? And this, right in front of them, is this astonishing example of this amazingly successful thing, which is hugely dependent on people from
all over the world,
every country in the world, right? And there's no answer to that, really, is there? I mean, it's like the basic argument, if you like, in our culture is the world better with a kind of a nationalistic approach to things?
From some elements of Britain. I mean, not Keir Starmer or Sadiq Khan, I would say.
No, but the prevailing trust.
There's a trend there. There's definitely a strain of English nationalism in Britain, and Nigel Farage may be representing that. Yeah,
and Nigel Farage widely tipped to be the next Prime Minister. Yes. So it's a really strong sort of movement, if you like. And working against it is this, like, thing. It's almost too big to see. Sometimes things are too obvious to actually make note of, right? But here we are with this thing. Like, we're living in a completely different country, and we're deeply engaged with this thing, right? People in like Ghana are probably engaged with it, right? So it's the great argument against all that little England thing, and for that it's very good. There are terrible things about it as well. I mean, really awful things about the Premier League. At one level, you could almost say, if it wasn't for the football, you wouldn't have anything to do with it. But that's rather a big aspect of it, I guess. You know, so I'll get onto that in a few minutes. You know, like Paul Kimmage alludes to aspects of that as well. But there are it's impossible to think of the Premier League without having a whole load of really negative views as well. About all sorts of cultural things as well. And
also it's petty state ownership of clubs, this kind of thing.
Everything. Like it runs, there are almost,
VAR, all the things in it. But I like, nothing's perfect. Look, we have the common travel area. We can go to the UK on a boat or on a plane. We grew up watching Match of the Day, a lot of us. I think some people would rather that we are more interested in the League of Ireland. I think you can do both. I was in 2018 for my 40th, I was at Liverpool-Manchester City. It was a goalless draw at Anfield. But at the end of that season, City had 98 points, Liverpool had 97. City won the league, Liverpool won the Champions League. And the quality of the football was off the scale. The touches, the skill, and this is the elite of sport. I mean, the quality of the games, like on Friday, Liverpool-Bournemouth, yesterday, like Manchester City with a conveyor belt of new talent, Dihani Rangers coming in and scoring and setting up a couple. It is just sport at its zenith when you talk about actual football.
When you mentioned that say City and Liverpool era as well, increasingly it's now quite clear that Liverpool team in particular is just one of the great teams. There's always a shadow over City because of our famous 115 charges. But when you look at that team of like Mane, Salah, Firmino, Alisson Becker, Virgil van Dijk, they seem like, they're like the Dutch team of the 1970s, which is still a legendary team, even though they didn't actually win a World Cup. People in their heads have that they did win the World Cup, really. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's quite a similar thing. So you have almost historically good football going on there, right? The stuff that in 20 years' time, I think that particular team will be just revered as like, how did that get together? How did such a good team, first of all, come together and also not win the league for the most part, or
just the one 2020.
Yeah, sure.
And even yesterday, Sunderland beating West Ham 3-0, haven't played in the Premier League in 8 years. And then if you're watching Match of the Day last night, you could feel the atmosphere through the television. So remarkable.
Great stuff,
but I think the things Shane is pointing out are wrong with the game there is fans don't care about that kind of stuff. When you get there on the day, you're walking up, whether it's Matt Busby Way or you're walking up Anfield Way and you're on the way to the game, none of that matters. That's not what you're thinking about. All you're thinking about is your, historical kind of connection to this thing. And, what you're saying is the easy access we have to world-class sport is not something that we should be taking for granted, because, there's a lot of people travel the world to see this. And, we can hop on, as you say, a boat or a plane. We, don't even have to bring your passport if you want to go. So, to have that kind of access to that kind of to that level of a sport is not something that should be sniffed at. It's not something, it's something that we should embrace. And it's, you kind of have history, like you have cultural connections with the country as well. I think talking about the number of foreigners now in the Premier League and versus the Little England thing, I think it's the reason they get behind the national team so much is to kind of say, this is still our sport. And, but I think it will start affecting their national team as it goes down the line and as, the number of English players in the Premier League diminishes. And I think it already has, and I think it further will. But we don't have that. We don't have access to that level in any other sport. So I think, that's why it resonates with people so much here. There's not as many Irish players there now as we would like, and certainly not as many as there was in the past. And that's an awful shame. But it doesn't. You still have that connection. The people,
Yeah, we were sort of here before anyone. I mean, like Irish people have had that sort of connection with English football forever. Do you know what I mean? So to some extent, we thought of it first, But the kind of just the richness of that experience is just something that's part of us, and it's. It shouldn't be downplayed. I mean, it's a really good thing, and the fact that we are sort of next door to it is tremendous.
And we've had John Giles, Ronnie Whelan, Roy Keane, Dennis Irwin, all these top players, Robbie Keane, Damien Duff. And obviously less of them now, and with Brentford playing today, Creving Callaher, whether he plays or not, but he'll be number one for the season. Nathan Collins, captain of Brentford, Josh Cullen, captain of Burnley. Jake O'Brien, probably going to start for Everton most times this season. So, look, there's been implications with Brexit and everything. We've got Troy Parrish and Evan Ferguson playing abroad now in Holland and Italy. But, yeah, I still think you can have the League of Ireland, and obviously you want that to grow. But, this is a 12 billion... euro, pound, dollar business.
Yeah, but look, I mean, I grew up supporting Athlone Town, obviously, and Liverpool. It did not in any way sort of diminish my life. In fact, it just enhanced anything, right? There was never, in my mind, any problem with that or any division. It was like better, you know what I mean? It made it didn't diminish my great love of Athlone Town. The fact that I also love Liverpool, so it's never that's never a negative thing. But it's interesting as well about the England national team. It's fascinating to see how the England national team doesn't work by comparison with how those players work in the Premier League. It's like just some experiment in how nationalism is a bad idea, because you suddenly realise that all these guys, like even top English players, that when you put them with players from 7 other countries, they look wonderful. When you just put them with their own guys, there's something not there. It's like they're too sort of. There's a fear or something that grips them. There's a kind of a lack of cohesion, right? It's weird to think that, isn't it? That you think that it would be the other way around. Like England, for as long as I've been looking at them, they have this kind of way of like one guy gets the ball and he stops and he gives the ball to another guy, and it's like, oh yeah, I'll give it to another. There's no sort of collective intelligence or something. You know the way you see like Iceland or something, and they all seem to be on the same page, and they're all, even though they're not individually talented at all, like the England players, they have a cohesion and an internal kind of sort of logic to them. England don't really have that, and so you'd think they would, but they don't. And in a weird way, it's the international nature of the teams they play for that gives them that, and they fit into that bigger whole so much better, Yes. So it's really interesting,
It is, and I think maybe the clubs being such big rivals has probably hindered English players playing together over the years. I think Gareth Southgate brought in a cultural reset where they all enjoyed it, and that's what Tuchel is a hard gun to get England to win a World Cup. It might not happen, as you say, for the reasons you've outlined there. Just on Paul Kimmage's piece in the Sunday Independent, I'll just quote the first 3 paragraphs of it. I quote here: there was a remarkable interview with Creving Callaher in the Daily Telegraph on Friday, exclusive, as we say in the trade. To be honest, I don't have much time for the Premier League these days, but I have passion for interviews. Here's what was remarkable. In the 1940 words presented, there wasn't one that interests me. So who is Creving Callaher? Does he have a pulse, bleed, breathe? How's his life been so far? Isn't he getting married soon? What have 10 years at Liverpool taught him? Does he fart, eat, read. Okay, man, all Man United clouds, but it makes me wonder, when did footballers stop being people? Was not getting anything interesting out of that interview.
Yeah, this is something I've experienced an awful lot over the last few years. So I'm features editor with the Irish Daily Mail, and we'll often get sports people offered to us for interviews related to a sponsorship of this or that, and you know, that's all. It's great, it's good content, but when I'm getting to the point where I'm loath to take them because they don't say anything. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is that if you are an elite athlete, you probably haven't got much else going on in your life, and that's fair enough, you know, and probably never did. So you know, your be all, your end all is training, is playing, is, you know, you have to eat certain foods. You're not really able to go out, you know, kind of socialising as in a normal way that people would. You're travelling a lot. You don't, you know, you probably haven't maybe got married at this point. So I am kind of, it puts me off. I tend to think they need to stay on the back pages. And, you know, the back pages tend to be more for wanting to know everything about the sport. Whereas in the front pages of the paper, you want more about the person and the lifestyle and the personality behind it. You know, and then one of the other reasons is that they are media trained to within an inch of their lives now. If they're at any kind of high level, there's a great example in the Keith Andrews interview today where they almost ask themselves the questions. So they are trained to turn, if they get a question they don't like, turn it into an answer you want, because you're in control here. You're the one who's talking. You're the person who can, you know, take this in the direction you want to. We also now have the case where PR people are sitting in on interviews, and if an interview is going away they don't like, they just step in and stop it, which is horrific. You know, it's an awful way to try to, you know, do business from our point of view. I was at, my nephew plays for the D7 darts team up in Cabra. He's 14 and they have a brilliant setup up there, and they had Luke Littler in the week that the Premier League was here in Dublin. I went along and his PR people were there, his marketing people. I said, you know, is there any chance I can get a quick chat with him while he's here? Oh, absolutely. Delighted with myself. Nothing. He says nothing, you know, and part of that is because he's still a child, you know, and the other part is, again, he's been absolutely media trained. In darts, it's been good in one way because Luke Humphreys is so good on a microphone in terms of the wider world. He speaks very well, speaks quite eloquently. He kind of knows how to give a line or two. So when he won the World Championship this year, he ended up on mainstream programming in a way that darts champions probably haven't in recent years. So in one way, that works for them. But for journalists, it's incredibly tough.
Why the stage management?
Because, well, there's a cancellation culture fear. That's what it is. It's one wrong thing and you're done. You know, you can absolutely be just wiped from, all your sponsorships can be gone. You know, a move to another club or to, you know, that can all be gone with one wrong sentence. And that's the fear of that is just so prevalent in the players' minds, in the club's minds. That they absolutely just want them to say as little as possible, while also putting them out there to in a sense.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, the corporate culture has, you know, just swamped football and a lot of other things as well, and you know, smart casual corporate culture and. Fear is very much at the centre of that. It's never about sort of. You know, bringing something new to the culture. Is always like, make sure you don't do anything stupid, right? Because our product is sort of worth so much. One of the most annoying aspects of it is, you know, when after a game you see players talking to each other on the pitch with their hands over their mouths, right? In case lip readers will deduce something offensive that they said. And as Linda says, like, sure, I mean, they live in this environment where if they say the wrong thing, it'll be all around the world in, you know, 2 seconds. So there's a justifiable aspect to it in that sense, but it's just horrible. I mean, it creates Paul Kimmage, he gives all these examples of parts of interviews he did or were done with players over the years, which are fascinating and brilliant and very kind of, you know, just interesting. You know, on another level, like Leo Messi, I don't think I've ever heard him saying anything. And yet that doesn't in any way diminish his whatever he was bringing to the world. So also before, like say in the 1960s or 1970s, I don't think people used to interview players at all. Like, I mean, you'd have the shoot thing, like, and which they all said that Muhammad Ali was the person they'd most like to meet, and their favourite food was steak and chips. And I think Dionne Warwick. Obviously, they had a form was given to them, right? and some of them just couldn't be arsed even changing the one or two of the words on the form. So that was what constituted your player interviews. But in the meantime, like obviously, people like Paul would bring something completely different to it and do really great interviews with people. Now I'm not sure, like. Like the image I love about a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, gives the example of a GAA star that he had arranged to interview, and the GAA star lived down the country, and my friend was just arranging the interview, and he said, you know, where should we do it? And the guy said, oh sure, I'll meet you halfway. Now, this friend of mine had been used to interviewing Premier League stars, right, who wouldn't actually come halfway across the room to meet him. Right, you know what I mean. It was entirely a non-cooperative, you know, what's the phrase? Passive-aggressive kind of culture. Whereas this great man, this legend, this GA legend was there. Sure, I'll meet you. Sure, we'll meet halfway. I mean, the difference in that attitude, I suppose, is kind of what Paul is on about. Like, what happened to human beings? You know, it is a natural human thing to actually say, I'll meet you halfway. But these fellas have travelled so far beyond the human realm that simply doesn't exist anymore. But it's also that, like there is that when you look at it at Sky and everything, even in the golf, this thing of apologising for people, you know, using bad language.
Which they're doing all the time now.
It's extraordinary. I mean, it's okay. You don't have to apologise. You didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing to apologise for. And yet, because of the format, because the culture, the corporate culture demands that kind of tokenism, they just all have to do it.
Yeah.
They simply don't have some kind of moral courage to simply say, we're not going to do this nonsense anymore. Put a disclaimer at the start. Some of these lads are going to be using bad language, you know.
Cup your ears if you've got kids in the room.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Get over it. Right?
Yeah.
So it does pervade that fear of being real and being interesting. I think that's the thing as well. You can see it on Match of the Day and stuff like you know.
Yeah, this is fascinating because I watched Match of the Day last night. Wayne Rooney was on it with Alan Shearer, and there was the cloud of bland over the pair of them. And I had insomnia after the Spurs PSG game during the week, and the Rooney documentary came on RT. And there's things in that which were, no, obviously it was a production that he was involved in, but there's things in that which are really honest. He felt he was the best player in the world at 18. He committed infidelities with Colleen Rooney, talking about how that affected her. He went out with the intention, when he was angry, of injuring opponents by putting longer studs on his boots. Fascinating stuff. Last night, now he's in a different role, but still the culture is there, the culture of the bland. I mean, and to be fair to Creving Callaher, these players live in a bizarre world. They're on tens of thousands of euro or pounds a week. They're managed in terms of their physique, like they're all the stats they got to give. They can't be out. If they're out, it's probably organised. They can't be out also because we're going to live in a smartphone culture. Well, somebody could pick up a phone and video you, or, you know, you can't be in a nightclub anymore. Back in the days where the 70s and 80s, the legends and Gaza could do it or whatever. And surely all he's thinking about is, I've got to prove myself for this club, whereas if I don't cut it, I'm gone. I'm on a short-term contract. I'm always on a 5-year deal, but the whole point is that you've got a short 10 to 15-year life. You're on tens of thousands a week. You're in a bubble. You're told not to say anything. The Premier League earned 12 billion from their corporate contracts. There is a massive culture here of don't say anything. And also it happens again at games where the culture of the manager says players don't say anything. Tommy Welch at Kilkenny never said a word to the press in his whole playing career, is now on News Talk with us, and he's one of the best, most fascinating people he could talk to. A lot of it is choice. But maybe the players feel like, you know what, it's not worth it to me to put my whole self out there until I retire.
Sure, it's like what, oddly enough, one of the great examples is John Giles, the great man himself, who, you know, sort of would never have been regarded as somebody who'd be good on television, because he said himself he had no interest in the media. His only purpose in the media was to tell them as little as possible, because he said his only relationship that mattered was with the players. When he was manager of West Brom, he had one relationship with, and that was with the players. That was the important thing. What his relationship with the media was totally irrelevant, and he would tell them as little as possible. So when Tim O'Connor, who was the head of sport at RTE, knew John very well and just assumed that he'd be awful on television because he never said anything that was interesting. But Giles said, no, it's okay. Once I'm on television, I'm fine. I'm not managing. I'm not involved in football anymore. And of course, he was great. So like, it's a long running thing. I mean, the idea that, you know, even in GAA, there's a kind of a level at which like there is this disdain for the media. You can even see it in people like, you know, even the best of, like, say, Gary Neville or people like that, who would be more forthright and more willing to sort of who work in the media and who are, you know, who apparently say things that you wouldn't normally expect. Even them, right? I still don't know what it was like in the Manchester United dressing room when Ferguson was going nuts, right? They reduce it to cliches, you know, the hairdryer, all this, right? Tell us more. I mean, even someone like Neville, they have that culture of just, you know, this is our thing in dressing rooms. That's what we do. And people outside it don't matter. They really don't. We don't care about them. And because they can only bring us down, right? And even the ones who have travelled a great distance from it still have that somewhere in them, you know. And partly there's things that happen that they don't think are interesting. Do you know what I mean? They just don't, in their heads, they think, why the hell would anybody be interested in that? Like what Fergie had for breakfast or something. Who cares what he had? But it might be actually very interesting, you know. Say, you know, there's that as well. It's kind of, you know, they're not journalists as such. So journalists see things in a different way. They regard certain things as being more inherently interesting than others. So there's a lot of things at play there. But it's not a new thing. It's just it's more extreme now than it's ever been.
I think as well, a lot of them are keeping stuff for the book or for the documentary that they're in control of. And there definitely is an element of control in it, with a big PR team behind you, and you know, so definitely.
Rio Ferdinand brought his book out a few years ago, and he revealed in an interview to us that there was the Chilean miners who rescued or something, and Ferguson brought them to United, and then like they met all the players and everything. This was on a Thursday, and there was no team talk, and the players went out because of just the magnitude of, like, that's what Ferguson's psychology was. So there you go. That's an example of Ferdinand brought his book out, you know. But you're also dealing with a feral British press as well. Now, the Red Tops maybe don't have the influence that they did have. But remember when Beckham came home from the '98 World Cup after being sent off, there was effigies of him. There was a hate campaign. This is before social media. So this is what you're dealing with. This is the mad culture of the feral nature of the coverage versus the corporateness and being part of that as well. So sometimes you're not going to get what you want out of an interviewee.
But that would Rooney, I mean, has Rooney, is it 3 autobiographies he has at this stage, like in his late 30s? You know, I think it was the first one, I think, was the only one I actually read. And it literally was just one after another of, the paper said this, but here's what really happened. The paper said this, here's what really happened. Just one story after another, just kind of discrediting things that had been in the paper. And so, but at the same time, I do understand the level of mistrust he would have of the media because of, you know, things that went on around. And, you know, he was so young at the time as well. So I do kind of understand in some way how he feels about the media.
Yeah, I think as well, it's another thing we should maybe be more kind of pleased with ourselves about, is that just a very general point I would have noted in my life, right, is that Irish journalists, on the whole, right, are what you might call fairly sort of nice people. You know, I've generally met sort of nice people in my life in journalism. They're okay, you know. This is not the case at all in England. I mean, you have terrible people. They're really awful people, right? To get to the higher echelons of the tabloid media in England, what kind of person do you have to be like?
Just cutthroat.
What?
It's cutthroat.
Oh, absolutely, right? And they're killers, right? Which doesn't mean they're any good. Do you know what I mean? We can always accept sort of, even in sport and everything, if someone is absolutely ruthless, but they're brilliant, like, you kind of can forgive a certain... These guys are useless. They can't write. They can't think. They're no good, right? They're just horrible people who manage to get sort of horrible stories about people that will destroy their lives, right? They're a terrible curse on society. And, you know, if you're sort of like a footballer, like a fairly okay bloke or something like that, you're naturally going to hate these guys or just be afraid.
But you're not going to trust them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there are exceptions, obviously. There's some lovely people as well. But, like, on the whole, you really are dealing with some terrible characters.
Yeah, well, you're dealing with a culture. Maybe it's not as bad as it was, but I mean, like the Graham Taylor stuff was awful.
Yeah.
Back in the early 90s and stuff, that kind of thing, the bullying, as it were. And we had it here with Steve Staunton, to be honest, at times as well. There's some profiles. You mentioned Keith Andrews in Sunday Times. There's a profile of Mikel Arteta in the Sunday Times, which is quite good on the obsessiveness and the quirkiness to Arteta.
Yeah, there's so I think it's one of the last few seasons. It's been, you know, that feeling that it was going to be City again, that, you know, and then Liverpool managed to turn it around last year. We all want something different every season. Nobody wants to be going into the same thing season after season. Said as a Celtic fan as well, but you know, I think there are very few football fans that wouldn't like to see Arteta win the league. I think outside of Spurs fans, perhaps Chelsea.
As a Spurs fan, I'd have to say no. Go on.
You know, but I think there's definitely I think he was quite liked as a player. I think he's quite liked as a manager. He's quite liked as a person. But I think it's Jonathan Northcroft has it has the profile in the Sunday Times today, and it's, you know, I think he makes a very, very good point. Arsenal are not slightly off the pace, or haven't been slightly off the pace in the last few years. They've been very off the pace in the last few years. So this is not a step that needs to be taken. It's a stride. And is he ready for that? But does he understand that? Does he think, as he kind of keeps saying himself, that they are only just, they're nearly there. They're not nearly there. You know, and as Declan was saying, you know, mid-April this year, they weren't there. If you're not there by mid-April, you're not nearly there. So I think there is definitely what Arteta says, what's actually the reality of it are two very different things. He does seem to think that, you know, as he said, he says, Jonathan Norcroft says today, for Arteta, victory is won by increments and in the details. And as Arsenal are trudging towards the promised land inch by inch and step by step, you know, it's going to take you a very, very, very long time to get to the Premier League title if you're going inch by inch at the moment for Arsenal. And it's certainly not happening this season if that's still...
Well, that's what Jokeris is there for.
Well, yeah, you know, it's a great signing. It's what they need. But... And you know, maybe it is the stride, but again, it's saying... he's saying here we should, with those numbers, Arteta has said with those numbers we should have 2 Premier League titles. If you dig down into numbers, it's not the case, you know. And it's just this front. So is he just somebody who just talks a good game, or does he genuinely have the substance to take Arsenal to the Premier League title? I think this is probably his last chance. I think if he doesn't win it I mean, if he gets down to it within 1 point of it, maybe. But to me, if he doesn't win it this season, I think he's probably gone.
Yeah, I mean, that I am, you know, disturbed by those lines about, you know, we got the most points over the last 3 years, stuff like that, right? That's almost like, so Mikel, let me describe the rules to you, the scoring system here, right? It's like saying if, you know, match play and stroke play, you know, if the Ryder Cup, you know, well, actually America did win the last Ryder Cup because their aggregate score was under, you know, I mean, you should leave that out. Never go down that road of kind of disputing the scoring system. I think that's really bad. All that kind of talk about data and everything like that, in a weird way, like this last season, for me anyway, showed that there's some kind of very, you know, eternal verities about football, right? And for some reason, I think, you know, the England team that won the World Cup, right? There was something extraordinarily kind of iconic about that team, which I think boils down to one thing, right? Which is they had 8 very good players and 3 great players, right? 3 great players would be, say, Bobby Moore, Bobby Charlton and Gordon Banks. 8 really, really good players around.
And one player didn't even make it, Jimmy Greaves.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And last year, Liverpool had 3 great players, which would be Salah, Van Dijk and Alisson, and 8 very good players. right? A couple of them bordering on the great, right? And that's it, really. I mean, like, you can talk about, like, I mean, the Arsenal last year had this thing about they were scoring a lot of goals from set pieces, from corners, and this was supposed to be a great tribute to their set piece coaches. You know what I mean? They would be celebrating on the field and high fiving each other, and then for a while that tapered off a bit, and they weren't scoring goals from corners, which happened to coincide with Saka not playing. He was injured, right? Could it possibly have been that the reason they were scoring all those goals is that Bakary Saka is just great at crossing the ball, right? That okay, once you get yourself up there, even if the set piece coach has arranged it all, that there are certain almost unquantifiable things, which have always been the great thing about football. That they're that's things you can't actually measure. I mean, for example, the great example you give there of Jimmy Greaves. Who would have thought that leaving Jimmy Greaves not playing for England might have actually been what ultimately gave them the shape to win the World Cup? And fascinating. I also felt it was really interesting about Greaves that there's one interview I saw with him, which he's always been so interesting about addiction as well. Do you know what I mean? Much more so than people who write about him. I mean, he really understands it, And he said it's completely kind of ridiculous to say that it was because he was left out of the World Cup that he turned to drink. It's not like that, right? But he said that what really affected him was that, to some extent, England winning the World Cup was an idea that formed in his head. He kind of thought of it first. And he's doing this interview and he's saying, I spread the gospel. Right, I saw that we could win the World Cup. I said to Bobby Moore and sort of Alf Ramsey, this could really work. And other people, they didn't really believe it at some. He believed it, right? And that's what really, I think, broke his heart. That it's like, I thought of all this before anyone else. That he had that sort of sense. It wasn't just like he was left out of a kind of of a match, right? So again, but who would have predicted that? Who could have quantified that? So when I see all this sort of stuff about data and players being signed because of data, I don't actually believe it. I deep down, I think there are ways of as you know, horse racing. Obviously, there are data goes a certain level, but Vincent O'Brien would know to look at a horse and could see him winning the Derby in 2 years.
Who generally wins on the horse is the best jockey.
Yeah.
Ryan Moore is the best jockey by a mile in flat racing. It was Lester Piggott, it was Willie Carson, it was Pat Edery. Like when I was a kid, Dad, who's Willie Carson riding? And you would not and you could do all the data, whatever you want. Yeah. The jockey, then whoever's the best. How many great players now? You'd maybe look at McAllister as a very good player now, but was it Messi and 10 other very good players at the World Cup? Probably.
It was, yeah. Well, actually, I thought it was a great mistake to when. You never sign players on the back of a World Cup anyway. That's one of the basic rules of life, right? I have never personally signed a player on the back of the World Cup, right? But the particularly if they're playing in the same team as Messi, right? You just don't stay away from it. As it happened, McAllister turned out to be really good, but Fernandes maybe not so much. Like everyone thought, God, Chelsea signed him, he's have to win the World Cup. It didn't really work out like that. So beware of signing players. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Tottenham signed was it Dimitrescu and Popescu after the '94 World Cup when they did so well in the United States. And look, sometimes it doesn't work, as you say.
El Hadji Diouf.
I remember John Jensen went for Arsenal after the Euros final in '92. So sometimes it can work, sometimes it might not work. Just on Gaelic games, Linda, because this is a very, in your paper, the Irish Daily Mail, a very interesting piece with Philip Lanigan. Whole lot done, lots to do. An interview with the F4C member, Colm Nally. He's a Louth man who's been a coach in the game. There will be a special congress at the GA on October 4th to vote on whether to keep the new rules, which I would argue were a massive success. And Philip has done an interview here. There was a trial game or a sandbox game between Dublin clubs Round Towers and Fingalians after the All-Ireland football final, in which some further rule changes were trialled, a 4-point goal and the removal of playing the ball back into the defensive half once the ball has crossed the halfway line. I'm going to quote from the piece here, just on the 4-point goal. The stakeholders are the players, and it was a really good workout that day. Fingalian scored 3 early goals when it was 4 points for a goal, but when we had a review with the players afterwards, the players all were fairly much in favour for the 4 points for the goal. And even the team that conceded the 3 goals felt that they still had a chance that they could get a few goals back, that they weren't out of the game, which I was a little bit surprised at myself. And Phillips asked the question, without jumping the gun, do you think there'll be further amendments then brought through to Special Congress? The 4-point goal is an obvious one in terms of value and rebalancing the scoring with the introduction of the 2-point score. And Colin replies, look, nothing's agreed until it's agreed. It's definitely on the table for discussion, likewise with the backcourt rule. Now, the backcourt rule, I think, is kind of future-proofing a lot of the rules in that it hasn't been a massive issue to date, but it could become one.
Yeah, it's
4 points for goal possibly could be in Gaelic football, maybe not permanently, but it's definitely on the table.
And 100%, and not only is he, not dismissing it, he seems to be pretty much encouraging the fact that this is absolutely on the table and looks perhaps likely that it is going to be passed. It's I think it's a great interview, and it's an important interview because until all these things actually come in and you see them in action, it's very hard to say how it will work. So we're at the end of a season where we've seen it all in action. So you're talking to somebody who's now one of the supreme decision makers in this to ask what they actually thought of all this. And the FRC are met this weekend to distill the data, so they're like looking through and going, okay, has this worked? I think they and most fans and most players will agree the rule changes have worked. You don't want them getting carried away with that and then hold on, let's bring in another one, but it does. What I did like about this was that he was saying the backcourt rule, that not only are they bringing in the new rules, but they're going, well, hold on, what are the things that could happen if we bring those in, and what can we do? Because you don't want to be in a stage where you're changing the rules every single year either. So they are kind of looking and saying, well, we have to see what this will cause, and that's what these games are for. These kind of behind the scenes games that are going on. It's really interesting that he says that it was the players afterwards were all very much in favour. I thought the stuff he had about the discipline as well. Yes, that's interesting. Yeah, because he's saying tackling the culture of dissent in Gaelic games required a major culture change. And Philip asked him how effective had the new rules been. So, he's Colin Nally is saying we're getting the reports in there now from the Games Intelligence Unit. One of the things that's striking at the moment is definitely around discipline. Last year it was 215 games, this year it was 214 because of one walkover. There's 25 red cards issued last year, only 8 this year. 29 double reds, as in 2 yellows, only 13 this year. There was 810 yellow cards, 539 this year, and the black cards down from 82 to 56. They're huge numbers. They're huge,
and very positive and very
absolutely, and a
cultural change again.
100%, it's a cultural change, and again, that all starts with the younger players, But if they're seeing that on the pitch from the older players, then that will kind of make it filter its way down to them. But they're absolutely huge numbers coming in. But it's and he's saying that I'll go down training here tonight, and all they want to do is shoot for 2-pointers, and it's great to see, and it's good to see that the rules are working, but this kind of analysis at the end of it with actual stats to back it up is very important.
Now, what a goal does for me in sport, there's a golden moment with golden Gaelic games where it really feels like a game-changing moment in a stadium. That the way the crowd reacts to it's just the momentum shifting in a game. And I think that maybe the 2-pointer, as great as it's been, as great as we've seen, like longer distance kicking and everything, has almost become the primary, I suppose, points issue in the game now. It's been the big score as opposed to the goal. Feels a little bit diminished in comparison to what it was for me personally.
Well, it's funny. Like if you look back at at football tables from before the Premier, before they changed 3 points for a win, the 2 points for a win versus 1 point for a win, it made seasons that shouldn't have been tight really, really tight. So and it didn't reward teams that were really going out and trying to win. So I definitely think the 2 point rule has definitely done that in Gaelic football. I think there's that feeling that it's far easier to do than it is to score a goal. So why would we be take 3 of them is the same as scoring 2 goals. So you're obviously going to aim to score 3 2-pointers rather than going for 2 goals because it's just far more difficult to do that. But I agree with you in that a goal is not just about the points on the board. It changes the mindset of everybody on and off the field.
Pitch, yeah. It's fascinating to see because there's talk about these rules being made permanent if Special Congress votes to bring them in October, but surely you'd have to have some kind of trial period if there was a 4-point goal. If you had this, you couldn't move the ball from defence, from attack back to defence if you cross the halfway line. So interesting to see what happens, but they haven't finished, I suppose, their work, the great work they've done, the F4C.
If I can make one sort of a small and possibly trivial point.
Yes.
But the mark, right? The mark is still there in Gaelic. I don't get that. To me, no, it's not my game as such, right? But just instinctively, anything that kind of stops the game doesn't seem like a great idea. Obviously, it rewards the skill of catching a ball, but I could understand it in rugby, obviously, because it's just chaos and madness, and to actually stop ball, there's a real challenge in that, right? And just the form or the kind of structure of the game seems to suit it. I don't really get it in if they're in the process of changing things. I don't get it in Gaelic, but maybe that's just me. Maybe
Do you have a view on the mark, Linda?
Not really. I mean, it's one of those things where you want to reward skill on a field, and I think that does that. If you have somebody who plucks the ball out of the air from a kick out, quite a long kick, that's a skill, and it should be rewarded as such.
But are you not losing something just by stopping the game? I mean, Mo Salah does all sorts of things. Personally, I would think the game should be stopped, and we should all sort of,
Well, you know what has really damaged football is VAR for me, because it's got the flow and the fluidity of the game, and also it's created a black and white world when we don't live in one. We live in a grey world where sometimes there'll be an Henry, there'll be a Maradona moment, but they're very few and far between. Football was not broken before VAR. You're talking about
it's killed celebrations as well, because
Aguero cannot happen now the way it did after VAR was introduced. Now, to be fair, the first night I didn't really notice in the Liverpool-Bournemouth game. In Europe, I think it's been well administered, but it's still, for me, I kind of get what you're saying about the fluidity of sport and the...
Well, that brings in a corporate culture thing as well, because now you have this whole panoply of refereeing officials who have created their own culture, which they're constantly rabbiting on about what's going on in the game. They have their own sort of world, which exists beside the actual game that's going on. They have to justify their own sort of their own sort of rules, if you like, and at one level, I mean, I've never understood why in the English game they've had this much better offside system in Europe for a few years. Why on earth could they not have done that? It was like because of the bureaucracy and they still were clinging to this idea, the referees have to, the ego of the individual referee has to be maintained in some way. But for offside, I don't think there's any argument. I think
they're going to be semi-automated now.
Yeah, but why wasn't it you have this situation where they're trying to introduce something and it's going to be a pain for a lot of people, right? Wouldn't you think that they would have gone to every length to make sure that something like that, it was used in the Qatar World Cup back in 2022. How on earth, again, the richest league in the history of the universe, right? That, we'll just take that then. Right?
It is strange. It's been...
but it's part of the problem. It's part of once you develop this bureaucracy and this culture, it self-perpetuates. It sort of exists in its own sort of world. And so, it's so annoying, stuff like that. And, I guess that they're addressing it now, but they should have addressed it a long time, because it allowed all that bad vibe to grow around it,
Some comments on YouTube. Donald here, it's difficult to imagine a more boring format than the Premier League. Before a ball is kicked, 17 of the 18 of the 20 teams have no chance. Well, it's a much more deep and competitive league than the Bundesliga, than the La Liga, than maybe the La Ligue 1 of France, I have to say now. And anybody, the middle class in the Premier League, can beat anybody on their day. Palace, Bournemouth, Brighton,
Sunderland,
like they did yesterday. So Brentford last season, anybody can be beaten. And Greg Caffrey's been in touch. It's become ridiculous, the whole nonsense about put it on the wall. If you need that, well, baby, you're in the wrong game. GA is about community. And Dermot Keenan absolutely shattered after the Oasis gig last night. No voice left and chattered, but would go again tonight if I had a ticket. Best gig ever. Were you at Oasis, Declan?
I wasn't, no.
Were you, Linda?
I'm off tonight.
Oh.
Yes. Can't wait. Although it feels like the whole world was there last night. So
everybody in my Instagram feed was at. I wasn't. I don't know how you meant to get tickets for this. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm too rusty.
What the Oasis basically, what it demonstrates is that the one thing that's been missing from the world for about like 20 years is the electric guitar, right? The sound of the electric guitar. Like, they did a piece on it on the News at 1 on RTE, like about 10 days ago, and they were just talking to people who were going to the gig, and in the background you could hear this electric guitar. I thought, like, it's such a great thing. It is the greatest. It's the sound of the century, right? There is nothing like it. There's nothing as sort of primal and as brilliant as synthesizers don't do it, right? They just don't. I mean, great production, but that does, like, an electric guitar being played loud out of a Gibson guitar being played out of a Marshall amp. We have lost that, and I think if we bring it back, and you can see the great need for it, the great hunger in humanity for it, and I think that's why the Oasis, partly why the Oasis thing is such a certain attraction. Just to hear really loud guitar music, it satisfies some basic thing in the human soul, I think.
Brilliant. A reminder, the Sunday Paper View and Off the Ball brought to you by Virgin Media. Enjoy an unbeatable lineup of live football and golf with Sky Sports and Sports Extra from Virgin Media. Talking to Linda Maher of the Irish Daily Mail and Declan Lynch of the Sunday Independent. And in the Independent, lovely piece with Sinead Kazan, with Cleena Maloney and Claudia McDonald, who got married recently. One plays for Ireland, one plays for England, and we got a World Cup coming next week.
Yeah, I love this story, and it's one of those that you could only probably get it in women's sport at the moment. It's not something that you will see in men's sport, I don't think, for a very long time. But for a married couple to both be going to the same World Cup, and they did. There was a thought that they might face each other in the Six Nations. It didn't happen. We can only hope that it maybe will happen in the World Cup. But it's a really lovely interview, and to be able to. There's very few couples, at this elite level of sport, and to read from both of them the support and the understanding you get from the other person, in this it's really, really lovely. And there's one part that I read, and it kind of really struck me, was that when Claudia got injured in February 2024 playing for Exeter Chiefs, she got a bad neck injury, the second one she'd had. But Cleena was doing commentary for BBC local radio at the game, and rushed from the commentary box to be beside her. Like, that's, it's the feeling of that, the terror, the horror that both of them must be going through for very different reasons. But it's a really, really nice interview, and just the way, as I said, the understanding the two of them must have, like that feeling, they both know what they have to do for breakfast, for dinner, whereas you don't have that in normal couples where one is an elite sports person and the other one isn't, and also, and you might have maybe mixed sport marriages, whereas this is the same sport, this is the same thing. Everything they're driving towards is the same thing. It's the same timing. It's the same. Like, it must be, in one way, an absolutely lovely thing to have, and in another way, there has to be that edge of competition that you have to be at that level. So, it'd be very, very interesting if they had to line up against each other. It'd be a really, really fascinating thing. Something probably they aspire to, but maybe dread in a little way as well. And I thought there was some lovely quotes from Cleena about when she, came back into the Ireland setup. And they're talking about her favourite game, her favourite moments, and it wasn't actually qualifying for the World Cup. She said it was the game in Canada, because she'd got to know the girls far better. And she says it's not when you speak to people about rugby experiences, it's not just about the winning, it's about who you win with. And I think that kind of camaraderie it's a lovely thing to hear about.
What's nice about the piece, apart from the love story, is that Cleena Maloney was part of the playing group that took on the Irish about their conditions, and she's still around now to be part of the picture, which is really important, I think. There's a story in the Sunday Times about Ozempic. That's the I don't use it now, so I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it, but Tom Kershaw's written a piece about it. So, is there enough evidence now to ban Ozempic for athletes? Use of weight loss drugs which cause a reduction in lean muscle mass is raising concerns, with anti-doping authorities monitoring the trend. So WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency is going to monitor this drug that's obviously been used by a lot of people to get them into a slimmer position.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's because you don't tend to think of sports people as needing to lose weight, because you don't want to be. You need to have power as well as a smaller frame. So not eating is not going to help you do that. So it's always been about eating the right things. But then, as they point out, in sports like boxing and horse racing, it obviously would come in really handy. You hear about boxers who don't completely dehydrate themselves before weigh-in sessions because it helps them to just lose the weight that they need to get onto the scales. So, but there's a worry that when you're coming into the likes of, I did like the line he has where cycling, a sport that never knowingly discounts an advantage, has also been mooted as a possible risk area. And Pauline Ferrand-Prévost's victory at the Women's Tour de France, she became the first French woman to win the title for 4 decades, featured an uncomfortable epilogue when the 33-year-old detailed how she'd skipped months of racing and followed a rigorous diet, reportedly losing 4 kilos, nearly 10% of her body weight, in preparation for the race. So obviously in a setting like that, it starts to become a worry then. They talk as well about, obviously, gymnastics is a huge thing because the things that young women and very young women have put themselves through in gymnastics to get to the elite level is shockingly bad, and it's disgusting that they have to do that to get to that level. So if you now have the likes of the Ozempic where you can, this can help keep the weight, it starts to go into very, very murky territory. The synchronized swimming is another one that they mention, and it's upsetting that some of the ones that they've mentioned the most worry around tend to be women's dominated sports. So it's there's definitely there's still lots of research to be done into it. It's interesting that they are looking at it, but I think it's they say the experts ban a substance from competition because it meets at least 2 of 3 criteria. It has the potential to enhance performance, it poses a health risk to athletes, or it violates the spirit of sport. I think the health risk to athletes is the major one with this, because
still a new drug as well. We don't know too much about this drug.
It is.
I love that. That is a great line, isn't it? Cycling, a sport that never knowingly discounts an advantage.
Yes.
That's great.
Just before we wrap up, your hopes for the season, because we have, I would say, the Liverpool and Manchester United are the 2 biggest supported clubs in Ireland. And we have a Liverpool fan and a Manchester United fan here. So, Declan, as a Liverpool fan, are you going to win the title again?
Well, first of all, John, I think Tottenham mightn't have a bad season.
No, we've got a very good manager, Thomas Frank.
Yes, really good manager. And I just again, maybe the data doesn't say it, but something tells me the vibe is better. Liverpool, just based on the other night, the immediate consensus, like Cara went in on this thing, they're wide open at the back. Now that ignore the fact that Gravenberch wasn't playing. Or, yes. In fact, Arnistot pronounced his name afterwards
correctly.
Yeah, which
the Dutch way
doesn't remotely sound like it's like
Gravenberch.
Something. It's anyway. He wasn't there. But more importantly, it's in PSG are now seen as the team, right? And PSG don't waste much of their time like in deep defence or knocking it around the bag. They like Pep's vision. The Barcelona has been the one for the last 10 years, more or less. People have copied that, and the old tiki-taka and all that, right? Maybe now someone like Arne Slot, who's a real kind of cutting edge sort of guy, right? He'd be thinking it's taking risks with the ball at certain times is what really gets you there, right? And weirdly, Gary Neville was kind of pushing back against Callaher, saying, and going back to an earlier person, Alex Ferguson kind of believed in that. He believed in playing kind of not off the cuff, but like he wasn't overburdened with tactical sort of awareness, In fact, I don't think he cared much about things like tactics, right? He believed in really good players kind of just taking risks, going for it, right? And maybe that's kind of coming back, that they've gone through this sort of phase of, endless recycling of the ball and playing the ball out from the back and all this kind of stuff. When in fact, when you have like someone like Mo Salah up there, or just really brilliant footballers, they can do so much, with beyond the game plan and the tactics and all that. That's really the way to go, and PSG have kind of shown that.
Yeah. For Manchester United.
You ask about hope. It's a strong word. There's a piece today in The Independent. It's Paul Hayward's piece, and it just set out last season. And you forget how utterly awful it was. Really, 18 defeats, only 11 wins, a record low 44 goals scored with a -10 goal difference. Amorim won 7 of his 27 games in charge. You think it can only get better? The fear is it could get worse, and if it does get worse, you'll be relegated. So it has to be better.
Well, with Sesko and Mbeumo, Cunha, you have to think it'll be better.
You have to think it'll be better. I think he's had more time now to get people on board with his plan.
Yeah.
I think there's still issues there. There's still holes there. I think defensively there's still big problems. The goalkeeper, I know Onana, he has his moments. He has his good moments, he has his bad moments, but I don't think going into a new season talk around Donnarumma coming, but the De Gea thing is has come kind of a bit from left field. I think there was talk of it around probably January, February this year, and that disappeared. That has to be very unsettling for him, and the one thing you don't want is Onana any further unsettled. So that's a worry. At the same time, it could give him the impetus to go out and be the best he can be to make sure they do keep him. But definitely the sense for me going into it is it can't be as bad as last year.
I think one thing I'd love to see from Manchester United this season is for the club owners and executives to treat people better. Because 100%. You're talking about like penny pension and vouchers being cut and people losing their jobs and just this culture of really austere behaviour when it comes to examining the salaries and I suppose the questioning your existence for somebody who be a normal employee, and then you're spending hundreds of millions. That is the absurdity.
Yeah, it's just so stupid. Apart from anything else, it's really stupid because the vibe that creates, it's so ugly and unpleasant. And a team or a club like United, which so needs to kind of change the whole mood around the place, it's counterintuitive, right? I mean, United are still an empire. But then so was the United States until quite recently, right? They copied the Liverpool model of destruction, right, for 20 years. They stuck rigidly to it, like we want to destroy ourselves just as Liverpool did, right? But Liverpool never got that low. I mean, Roy Hodgson, that was the worst, that was the lowest.
Dixon Gillette was a bad time.
That was really, when they were showing, a bit like Trump, they'd show the model of the stadium. They were always showing the model of the new stadium. And that was it. They just did a model. They put all the resources into the model. There would never be a new stadium. But even then, those Liverpool were still coming like 7th or 8th, kind of. They were never down that level. They were never near the relegation zone. So it's hard to know if United have kind of gone so far down that it's so much harder to come up. But you never know. You never know.
Okay.
I do. I find it weird as well that in today's paper you're still getting transfer news. I always find it strange start of every season that
until the start of September. Yeah, and it is huge because what's going to happen with Isak? I mean, I'm a Spurs fan. Is Eze going to sign? And it's still but it's part of the industry. It's such a huge, integral part of the industry. It's insane to me. Like we were talking about one season earlier where it was 1 point made the difference. Like that, your first game of the season can be the difference in whether you win the league or not. Yeah. And you still don't have all your pawns in place. Like it's crazy.
This is to do with that the European window stays open. Is there a reason for this? A good reason for it? Because there's loads of bad reasons. So I mean, I assume there must be something that because you can still buy players from Italy or something but up to the end of August. Is that it? Is that the reason for it?
I think everybody would have to close at a similar time, but I think there is this definite sense of having the summer off. And even if there is a World Cup,
well, for example, Evan Ferguson hasn't started yet. He'll be starting next week.
So it's that kind of thing is just insane. Like
Yeah.
Your team going out on your first day should be your best team
Yes.
for the season, bar injuries, you know?
Enjoyed the chat. Linda Maher, the
Yeah,
Irish Daily Mail, Declan Lynch, Sunday Independent. Thank you so much. Enjoy the season. The best team win.
Okay.
And we're back in your radio 1 to 7 here on News Talking Off the Ball. 2 live and exclusive Premier League commentary games to bring you on the opening weekend of the season. So Stephen Doyle and Brian Kerr are going to call the game between the leaders Nottingham Forest and Keith Andrews Brentford, match with a lot of Irish interest. And then Nathan Murphy and Keith Tracy will describe the showdown of Manchester United and Arsenal from Old Trafford. We're back on your radio 1 and we'll chat then.
The Sunday Paper Review.
On Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Virgin Media. Enjoy an unbeatable lineup of live football and golf with Sky Sports and Sports Extra from Virgin Media.